So I feel so lucky to introduce Jade because he is a very good friend of mine, and I was just working out today that I've known Jade for more than 25 years. And
Whoa.
yeah, long time. But then actually Sophie trumped that when I got on the call because I've known Sophie even longer than that. So
Wow, amazing.
yeah, it did sound like a long time. But how I would describe Jade and how I do describe Jade to someone is he is somebody who has always walked to the beat of his own drum. And when we were back in university, everyone was studying commerce or law or whatever, the standard kind of stuff you do. And Jade was the one guy in the 90s who decided he was doing Mandarin. And no one really understood why. But Jade, the other thing about Jade is that he is a total visionary. And everything he does is aligning with a vision that he has for himself. And that has never stopped. He's always got a vision and a goal that he's working to, and he pretty much always achieves it. So he's incredibly inspiring. I've seen him evolve as a serial entrepreneur. I've been to visit him in Beijing a couple of different times and seen his businesses that he's grown from the ground up, and seen how enamored his employees are by him and his leadership abilities. As you probably saw in the bio, he was the first company to bring in B Corp for his pizza chain. Is that right? That's right, Jade?
Yeah, third B Corp in China. Yeah.
First B Corp in China, which is pretty awesome. He founded Earth Day in Beijing, which is pretty awesome. And maybe we can do Earth Day Waiheke follow up. And yeah, he's also been an advisor to the NZTE and to the New Zealand government, and I'm sure he's going to share some of these stories, but a truly inspirational person who is really taken a different path and is just extremely visionary and inspirational. So lucky to have him on Waiheke and sharing his knowledge with us.
Oh, amazing. Wow. Well, I can say, yeah, last night my head was in a spin and I needed life coaching from Simi. So it's not all, it's not all amazing stuff, but keeping it real. And that's what we're here for tonight, right? Is to share our vulnerabilities with our community, the people we care about, the people we want to see succeed in life. And as we all know, is, anything from entrepreneurs and self-employed and contractors and various roles we're in. End of the day, it's about coming together and supporting each other through times like now, and that's how we succeed, especially as a community. So I'll just kick in Sophie, Sim, and just kind of run through a bit of the story about, I guess, resilience and in the face of, well, unfortunately, in the face of epidemics and pandemics, and we'll just see where it evolves, eh?
Sounds good.
Cool. Guys, as Sim mentioned, well, first off, Jade, originally from the Deep South, born in the metropolis of Twizel, and then have always been trying to go somewhere bigger, I guess, and ended up in Beijing with 24 million people. But I call Wanaka my spiritual home. That's where we've always had a home and always gone for holidays, and my best memories probably in life. And it was actually last week, I was on a call similar to this with about 15 F&B, food and beverage entrepreneurs in the Wanaka community, who are obviously being hit as hard as anybody in New Zealand right now, with tourism, literally shutting down. And unlike Waiheke, they don't have an Auckland on their doorstep. So, it's pretty rough down there right now. But it was a great session, and I mentioned to Simi, and hence here we are now. As Sim mentioned, I did Chinese and marketing at university. And then I pretty much jumped on a plane and went to China in 1996 and just arrived back last November. So it was about 25 years up in China. And yeah, pretty much my adult life has been spent offshore. And pretty happy to be back in Waiheke right now, away from lockdown in Beijing, I can assure you. But I do have a lot of friends who are up there, who are currently going through that and have been through some pretty rough times up in there, including friends who have family in Wuhan and whatnot. So it's been quite a roller coaster for them. I think the relevance of tonight of me coming on has been this is actually the fourth pandemic I've been through, or sorry, epidemic I've been through as a business owner. I've been through SARS in 2003, avian, swine, and now COVID. Most of the others didn't affect the West, but they definitely affected China to varying degrees. Before COVID, SARS was the big one, and I actually lost my first business, which was a fitness center in Beijing over SARS. We just built out two fitness stores. We just started franchising, and it was all looking very positive. And then SARS came in, and we lost everything in about 2 weeks, which is pretty rough because the government shut down the city, and our clientele were foreign students. There was about 50,000 foreign students in Beijing. We were in a campus of 20,000 foreign students. And they left in about 4 days from SARS officially being announced by the Communist Party. And they didn't come back for about 18 months. So that was pretty harrowing. First business, and I had a choice to come back to New Zealand, and everybody was screaming for me to come home. And I realized my home actually was in Beijing. I had a business there, I had an apartment, I had a pet dog, I had friends, and I decided to stay during SARS. And it was during SARS I actually founded my next business about 3 months later, which was a New Zealand style cafe bar in the student area. And I picked that up under duress because the landlords finally in Beijing were willing to talk, which they'd never been willing to. They'd always had the upper hand. So that's definitely one of the biggest lessons we learnt, is that landlords become very negotiable during these times, and don't forget that, despite the strength they like to portray. And then we founded the business, and that was 17 years ago. We went through, as I said, it was a food and beverage business. We did various restaurant concepts, and we opened about 12 stores across Beijing, from nightclubs to bars to mainly pizzerias and New Zealand style pizzeria. And actually, my first inspiration for my New Zealand style pizzeria was Bevan Khan from Dragonfied Pizza. And I used to come back, my mother lives on the island, so I would come back and see her and go down and have a slice with Bevan. And I was amazed at his organic whole wheat pizzas. And I pretty much took that idea back to China with his blessings after he didn't want to come and join me. He was pretty happy on the beaches of Waiheke, as you know, Bevan. And I ended up, doing a gourmet pizza brand and chain in China. So going through crisis, we then got hit by COVID. I actually sold out of the business last year, but I've stayed on as a director and of two companies that I started up there. And so I'm very much hands-on with what they've been going through in the last 3 to 4 months. And it's been brutal, straight up. It's been very brutal. But that being said, the Chinese are very resilient. And we don't talk about resilience. They've been through, in the lifetime of their parents, they've been through famine, they've been through political upheaval, they've been through revolution, you name it. So they're a pretty resilient lot. And I learned a lot from the Chinese and their resilience. And take away the whole issue of China's, to blame in this, just purely at the Chinese people, not the Chinese government. They're an incredibly inspiring people in terms of just moving forward in times of challenge. So I learned a lot from my team and the people around me. I would say that the thing we learned from SARS when I lost my first business was I came across a book called Good to Great, Jim Collins. I hope some of you have read it. And it was a great chapter, and I think it was titled, and it was talking about a thing called the Stockdale Paradox. And for those of you who have read it will know what I'm talking about. For those that don't, Admiral Stockdale was the highest ranking POW in the Vietnam War from the Americans. And he spent about 4 or 5 years in a Vietnamese Viet Cong POW camp. As you'll know, there was a lot of people died in those camps. And Stockdale, basically, his camp had by far the largest number of surviving POWs. And they did some research into this after war, and they discovered it was down to the culture that he built in the POW camp about survival and resilience. And that came back to they then coined the Stockdale paradox, which is face the brutal facts, never give up hope. Face the brutal facts, never give up hope. And what it does is it really gets your mind in the right place to face something like what we're going through right now. And it was all about the fact is we can't deny what's happening, and we're in absolute upheaval. We don't know how much upheaval, but economically, socially, culturally, we're going through something like we're probably never going to hopefully go through again, and once in a lifetime experience. And it could get pretty rough, as we're all aware. So we need to face those brutal facts. We can't put our head in the sand and hope it's going to be better before we face those facts. And once we've taken account of those facts and been very pragmatic about it, then we need to, on a spiritual and an emotional level, be absolutely assured that we'll never give up hope, that we're going to get through this in one piece and we'll come out better for it. And that's got to be the mindset. And what they discovered in the POW camps, it was the optimists that died the first. And it was the ones that said, hey, let's keep our spirits up and we'll be out of here by Easter. And Easter came and they were still there. And then the optimists would say, well, by Christmas, we'll be surely at home, we'll be having turkey with our families. And Christmas would come and they'd still be in the POW camp. And they died of a broken heart. And he said the ones that died literally broke, that was spiritually broken. They weren't more physically broken than anybody else. But the ones that accept their situation, they had no idea how long they're going to be there, but they knew that they would get through it. They're the ones that survived. And without trying to dramatize the situation we're in right now, there's a lot of parity of where we're at, which is we need to face where we're at. It's going to be rough. But yeah, if we come together and do things like this, we're going to get through it. And the sooner we get our head around that, I think the healthier. So it comes down to the simple mantra of plan for the worst and hope for the best. And as we're starting to plan what our businesses and our livelihoods and our families look like moving through this, I think it is very wise to be planning for the worst. And I know in the way I operate with my team, when we look at cash flows and budgets and forecasts, we typically fall back on the worst case scenario as our baseline to make decisions. And anything above that is a bonus. And we'll all make money when things are going well and, you know, it's all great, but we need to plan for the worst. And I think if you look, Rob Fife, who's running the response committee for the private public sector crossover, ex-CEO of New Zealand, he, in his interview with the Herald, he basically said the same thing. You know, it is all about planning for the worst. And that's the only way you can really take it. And then, hey, everything else is a bonus. So on that, the way we've approached in my business, I'll share with you over the last SARS and COVID and avian, has been, we've really learned to go hard and go early. And I don't mean to quote Prime Minister Ardern, but it really has been our mantra for 10, 15 years in any crisis. One thing in China, we get thrown a crisis about every 2 or 3 years by the central government. And the Communist Party is very good at sending out central policies which have a huge effect on your business. One example, we got given 3 hours notice that you could no longer smoke in restaurants or bars before the law was coming into action. 3 hours notice. It was the night of New Year's Eve in 2012. So, you know, and we're a bar with no balcony and our people come and, you know, Chinese smoke. So it was, you know, just threw us into absolute, it destroyed our revenue overnight. So this is kind of the stuff that we've dealt with over the years. So what we do is we go straight into the situation with SARS and COVID, is we get very much a mindset of survival, not about growth or prosperity, or, you know, we put that on hold. That's not really our mindset. We decide to get back to that once we get through the worst of whatever is ahead of us. So survival really is the name of the game. And we're very aware that there'll be good times in the back of bad times, which is always the case, and a lot of opportunity. And have no doubt there'll be a lot of opportunity at the end of this, in terms of, unfortunately, a lot of people will go under, and there'll be a lot of gaps in the market for those who have survived, and a lot of demand. So, you know, that's the motivation for survival, that the good times will come back. For us, we approach it, you know, it's a financial game at the end of the day, and getting through this, we look at the two parts of finances, and we always start with costs first. because that's the one thing we can impact immediately. So really it's about stopping the bleeding or any potential bleeding in the future. What we're trying to do in my business is we're always trying to create runway. And how do you give yourself a runway during this time? When I say runway, a length of time that allows you to take off. And when I say take off, survive, right? Before you go off the edge of the runway and you just don't get liftoff. So right now, for us, liftoff is survival. It's not growing. It's just getting out of the crap, if you could describe it that way. So the length of runway is a key part of that. And that's basically going to come back to your cash flow. How long can you cash flow until you basically run out of cash, right? Or your creditors start calling on debt or whatnot. So all our decisions right at the start is trying to project our cash flow in terms of runway. And we know the longer we have, the better decisions we can make, the more opportunities that can come our way, the more time we've got to collaborate, find new revenue streams. All these things are going to be critical to surviving, is going to be determined pretty much by your runway. So cash flow management becomes absolutely key. And that's the first thing we go to in this situation. Once we've looked at that, I mean, it's going to come back to, I mean, we're a very labor rent intensive business, restaurants, a lot of overheads. So straight away, we go straight to our employees and look to how we're going to reduce that cost. The first thing we do is offer, who wants to go home, who wants to take unpaid leave, all these kind of scenarios. And we basically put it to the team, just to see where is the opportunity to align with people. Once we've got to that, then we need to make the tough decisions about whether it's redundancies or bring people's wages down across the board or hours or whatnot. I don't know how many people in this group have a large payroll, but I imagine not a lot from the initial conversation. So maybe that's not a big area of cost saving for you guys. Another area would be obviously overheads on office space and any retail space. Again, I'm not sure if that's a lot of people in that world. Is that right, Sophie, Sim? Not really. Okay.
No, not really. We're actually quite a lean group, which is quite fortunate that we tend to be working on our own and maybe hire a few subcontractors and not have too many overheads.
Okay. Well, that's going to be, that's going to play well in this unfolding situation. But just to give you a level of the austerity that we take, so you can look at your own situation and think, well, how hard do I need to go? What does hard and fast mean? For example, our restaurants typically have 25 to 30 employees per restaurant. And right now they're operating on 2.5 people each, right? So we've got one in the kitchen, we've got one on the floor, and we've got a manager that goes between 2 stores. That's how we have opened up, and we'll retain that for probably another 2 or 3 weeks, right? And a big part of that is, aligning expectations with our customers, saying, look, this is what we need to do to survive. If you want us around, in 3 to 6 months, just be patient, because if we have 4 or 5 staff, the cash flow is not going to work, and we'll close down next month. So that's kind of the level of austerity that we've taken. So you need to work out in your own cost structure, what that means for you.
Viva just reminded me that we do have a few people who do have these overheads. They're just not currently in the meeting today, so that stuff is really valuable. Yeah,
and it is. It's been very, using words like brutal and really slashing straight away. What I would say to that as well is we learned during SARS that it was the ones that delayed and procrastinated the hard decisions were the ones that typically failed. And we saw that a lot during SARS. They either didn't have the stomach for it, they wanted to get more information before they made these tough decisions, and they delayed, and their runway just got to the point when they finally made a decision, their runway was so short that even though if they acted on all the great ideas they had, they didn't have the cash flow to make it happen. And so we definitely learned that in times of crisis, you need to make quite fast decisions on imperfect information. And if you're waiting for all the information and everything to be really clear before you make a decision, in my experience at least, that is a recipe for failure. But you need to strike a balance between making panicked decisions, which are also not healthy. So we need to get as much information as we can, and you start to get a feel when you've got probably as much as you only get for the the immediate time. And once you've kind of got that information, you've spoken to enough people, and you've done your accounts, and you've looked at all your numbers and all these kind of things, and you've done your cash flow forecast, you've kind of got to make a call. And I wouldn't delay. I just make those tough decisions. The best way we did was always 3 scenarios: best case, likely case, worst case. And you've really got to nut those out. I think you'll all understand when you go through the numbers, it all becomes actually quite simple. It's when you avoid doing the really hard number crunching, it gets you stress a lot, you think a lot, you overthink stuff. Numbers tell the story. And I know it's a bit painful sitting down with your accountant or on your own with Xero or whatever you do, but I would really strongly advise that should be pretty much the first thing you should do, is really get deep into your numbers, be brutally honest with yourself, looking at these scenarios, give it to somebody who's good with numbers. If you're not, let them relook at it. And once you go through that process, in the few days you do it, you come out of it, one, brutally honest, which is a good place to be. Secondly, you'll find a lot of the emotion gets taken away from the decision making, and you're actually empowered. You feel quite empowered. You're like, you know what? This is so obvious what I got to do here. I don't start holding on to my pet projects or things I'm really passionate about, or it just becomes so obvious. And you start to actually get a lot of confidence. Like, you know what? I can actually, if I do this, this, and this, I can actually get through this. So I would strongly suggest facing numbers as soon as possible. And I'm sure a lot of you already have. In terms of other parts that we cut out of the business, you know, in a restaurant, we had many restaurants, and you look at, in the group, we looked at the ones, we kind of had the litmus test. What were the ones that were struggling or kind of breaking even before the crisis? And what were the ones that were actually quite strong businesses, revenue streams before the crisis? Because everything's put under distress during a crisis like this. And it's quite hard to differentiate between what is actually a valuable part of your business and what's not. And it could be anything like Alan mentioned, maybe boats, cars, and trucks. I mean, maybe one industry is a lot more viable than the other. So it's about going through your business model and saying, what are the things that have always been the cash cows? Where's the low-hanging fruit? It's time to double down on that. And the things that have always been maybe you're hoping or had shown potential, that this is the time to cut them loose. You can always go and pick them back up at the end of this, but you know, it is definitely a time for not holding on to your pet projects, and really supporting the assets that were viable pre-COVID. That would be another takeaway for me. So costings, kind of, that's the key things we went through. In terms of credit, government assistance, I really don't know, guys. In China, you can't get credit as an SME, and you don't get support from the government. So I've got no idea on that. I can see New Zealand's a lot more set up for that than China. So that's a great place to be in. In terms of then revenues, and you know, we look after, once we've done all the hard cost stuff, which is typically a lot more painful because it involves people and livelihoods and whatnot. We then go to revenues, and we look at, okay, how can we, you know, how are we going to keep revenue going, or how are we going to increase it, or you know, really refine it. And the other great thing, obviously, with revenue, it gives you runway again. So we're trying to add to the runway through adding time rather than trying to remove the panic through cost control. And what we've found is that you get actually bloody innovative and creative in a crisis. And all those things you've put off for years, you actually get, I mean, I don't know how many restaurants in Wanaka I spoke to last week who said, yeah, we always thought about delivery and these apps and all that. And now they're just, you know, they got it done in like 10 days, where it took them 2 or 3 years of procrastination and reasons why they wouldn't do it. So embrace the positives of this, and you know, crisis, you know, necessity is the ultimate source of innovation, and you know, harness that energy. Don't use it in a negative channel and worrying and thinking, and try and harness it towards your innovation and saying, yeah, I am stressed, I am worried about revenues, and I am worried about how we're going to do things differently. How do I channel that into creativity, innovation, right? Does that mean speaking to people who are naturally creative, innovative, people outside of your industry? Is it going online and watching some TED Talks about in your industry? Like, immerse yourself in creative thought process to counter that angst. And you'll find that angst is a human condition. It's there for a reason. things like anxiety and fear are there to help us survive. And so now you've got to tap into those natural human natures that are actually beneficial to us if they're not allowed to overwhelm us. So really focus on that, because it can be a huge source of your survival and thriving. An example being my restaurant business was founded in the middle of SARS, because I was stressed. I had about $40,000 to my name, lost everything in the gym, and I just doubled down on trying to find an innovative way. And, we built 12 stores out of that, so how to harness that is really important. Examples and what we're doing, we've obviously moved towards delivery a lot. We've pivoted towards a lot of online, and I think we're going to see a lot of e-commerce, online business really kick in the next 6-12 months going forwards. So I think everyone's pretty aware how to become a lot more online savvy. It's definitely a good investment of your time and money right now. And also looking at I think getting really innovative with collaborations and reaching out to your community and thinking of ways in which to cross sector, cross industry, things you wouldn't normally think of, because you can really leverage on other people's databases, maybe initiatives they're doing. Don't just get caught up in your own industry. It can be quite empowering when you suddenly have this whole new revenue channels open up that you never thought of. And right now we've done an ad business in Beijing with one of our restaurants. We've partnered up with a whole lot of fitness chains to deliver them healthier food, and all these kind of things that we had maybe thought about in the past but never pulled the trigger on. So definitely get quite creative with who you're collaborating with. Other things I'd say would be on the upside, whilst it's going to be cash flow tight now and things are going to dry up for a bit, on the end of this, if you do get through it, there's going to be a lot of money. A lot of people are going to be looking for opportunity, and all the contrarian investors and government money and these investors that kind of unfortunately wait for times like this, that money is going to be around. And if you can get through it, that is a huge badge of honor to these guys that you're the ones that survived. And so I wouldn't worry so much about finding funding or how you're going to pay for things in 6 to 12 months. I honestly believe that will be there if you can prove that you can get through this time. And so it's a great chance to lean your business, or and we all think we run a lean business. I'll guarantee there's another 30-40% there, and this is the time you'll find it. It's like when you're training for something and then you realize that you've actually got a lot more in the tank than you ever realized. So don't rest on your laurels if you think you're running a pretty lean ship. We went from 30 employees to 2.5 per restaurant. That's where that's how much fat we cut out of our business. So really, really encourage you to reassess how lean you are. And the last thing I'd say, which I love about Waiheke, guys, a couple of things. One, you've got a very tight-knit community. And I think we're going to need a lot of support from the community in terms of keeping these businesses alive. I've seen it a little bit in Wanaka, but I see it even more in Waiheke. There's an incredible spirit here. And I think the island makes it, that geographical isolation really feels like we're in it together, which we, literally are. So I think, I have a lot of faith in that. And also the fact that Auckland is on our doorstep. And that is such a gift right now, that everything's going to be, revolved back to domestic consumption. Well, we've got a third of New Zealand's population 30 minutes away. And yet we're offering something totally unique. So, be really focusing on the Auckland market and how we're going to leverage the hell out of that, because that's going to be our saviour for the next, 12, 24 months, at least until Australia comes on tap. So, and let's face it, a lot of these companies are no longer going to be going offshore for their junkets. They're not going to be taking their staff down to Queenstown for a ski trip. They're going to be, sharpening their pencil, and they're going to go across to Waiheke for a weekend of wine and good times on the beach. So, we're very well positioned. I'm talking from an F&B background, but I think in terms of services, Waiheke is in a really strong position compared to a lot of smaller communities. So take heart in that. I think that's me for now, and I'll hand it back to the hosts.
Thank you so much, Jade. That was awesome. I felt like I just got like a master course in business just then. I think I think it's really good for us to hear these real like truisms, because just to be really a lot of, I suppose, because a lot of us, not all, are in the semi-creative industry. Sometimes we're not quite so, you know, hard with our financials. So it's good to kind of get that wake-up call that, you know, we really need to start thinking about that too. And I think a lot of your learnings apply so much to what everyone is doing in business. Yeah, so no, that was amazing, and I loved it.
Hope it wasn't too F&B centric, but that's,
no, it's cool. That's your background, and I love just looking at it through all our unique lenses at your experiences. It's amazing to hear what you've been up to. So I'll ask some people if they've got any questions or got any comments. Sue.
Yeah, thanks, Jade. It's really nice, actually. I'm quite enjoying just hearing, you know, let's talk about the numbers. So can you talk about suppliers? Because that would seem to me, I'm doing some work with an organisation at the moment that's using it as an opportunity to get some better deals out of suppliers, particularly in the media and advertising industry. What's the approach? What's the strategy? Because obviously some of those, you want them to be long-term relationships. Is it fair to ask them to share the pain, for instance, share the upside, take a little bit of risk with you as you are asking them to come on board to help you as a business?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd say with any stakeholder in the business, they need to share the pain, and you'll see pretty quick people's, you know, stripes and spots, and there'll be situations where people maybe can't, but you'll see the authentic ones, the ones that are just trying to hold out. And with suppliers in Beijing, and probably with landlords in a similar boat, we initially, the conversation we always go on is like, we're very open. We pretty much show them our book saying, look, this is our reality, and we need this from you in order for us to be able to maintain, you know, as a client of yours. Otherwise, we're going to basically fold, or we're going to be forced to do things which aren't going to be good for either of us. So this is what we need, and we try and make it reasonable. We don't, you know, skin them for too much, and we really just be completely legit. And what we find is actually, especially, you know, we've been 17 years, a lot of these guys, so they've been very supportive. You know, we've always paid our bills, and now's the time you can lean on that. So if you've got good relations, absolutely lean on it. And and they'd expect nothing less, and they totally appreciate your situation, and they want to see you get through it. What we find with suppliers, actually, and quite surprisingly, it was the larger ones, the bigger companies who really have the leverage over you, have actually to be the most supportive, because we're a smaller business. We're not, you know, we weren't a Fonterra or a Goodman Fielder, so they would kind of just, you know, they weren't worried about us. They're worried about the $200 million account due next month from Fonterra, kind of thing. So they're actually very supportive. I think just because I maybe even have enough time to deal with us. What we found, it was the smaller suppliers that yelled and screamed, and it's understandable because that's their lifeblood. And so we actually prioritize the smaller suppliers to help. You know, we understood their predicament. And we just explained to the bigger guys, like, we're just going to have to be slower or pay you less for now or whatever it was. And they seem to be generally really good with that. And so that was the way we approached it. I actually thought it'd be the other way around. The big guys come in heavy-handed, you know, threaten to close you down overnight. And the small guys kind of would support you and knowing what you're doing. But no, it was the other way around, and it kind of works out. So we've generally found suppliers pretty good. I would also say that one thing they have moved towards is cash on delivery, which we, you know, very unusual. But right now in Beijing, all of our stock is cash on delivery. There's no invoicing because so many companies are on the verge of bankruptcy, and so they're willing to support you, but you need to pay it now, and then you can delay the other 2-3 months you've already got. You know, they'll let that get pushed out, but anything new needs to be paid on delivery. So, and that's a fair kind of, you know, trade-off if they give us the break on the other invoicing. And the last thing I'd say around that was with our landlords. You know, we always said to them, we share the pain, and generally the ones that did, you know, we worked out a deal, but some that won't, and we've had 2 in Beijing that have refused to budge anything, like 100%, nothing, you know, give us nothing. And we just basically told them, well, sorry, we're not gonna pay you anything. I'm willing to pay you 60%, but if you don't want to take a rent break, then we're going to give you nothing. And by the way, I'm not leaving. I'm not vacating this premises. And if you want to go to the police, you want to go to courts, and you want to cause, and you want to see what that causes in terms of your reputation, and nobody wants that right now, given how much pain people are going through. So as long as you're being reasonable about it, like you're trying to negotiate, but if they're refusing to negotiate, well, I'm refusing to leave, and you can call the police to come in and get rid of me. And that's my approach, not everybody's approach, but it's worked pretty well. And they then come back and say, well, okay, let's rediscuss. And let's not forget, a lot of these suppliers and landlords, they're also doing it pretty tough, and they don't want to lose their clients. So even though you're probably the smaller person in the relationship, don't undervalue what you bring to the table. You're still cash flow for them. You're still paying their bills, their overheads, their mortgages, whatever. So, stand up if you feel it's completely unreasonable.
Awesome. Thanks for that response. I think Emily would like to take a break from, she's showing her face and her baby right now, so she can unmute and ask a question to Jade.
Thank you so much, Soph. Thanks, Jade. Amazing talk. I have lots of questions. I work with food and sustainability and food businesses. But I just have a curious question about the supply chain of food in China, and right now how that is actually looking in terms of getting the food to your restaurants. For example, coming from farmers and growers and all of that, and how they're faring in COVID. I know that takes away from the crunchiness of the business.
I hear you. What I'd say is definitely, Emily, jump on, and this is not a plug by any means, but I think it's quite useful. I actually do a podcast, and my last one yesterday was a restaurateur in Beijing, and he talks all about supply chain and how they've been affected by it, and also a lot about New Zealand supply chain, because he does a lot of New Zealand seafood and wines and whatnot. So I'll send that through to Sophie and Sim, and they can pass it on. But what I would say is that it's been surprisingly efficient. I think governments have realized, supply chain management's key. It's national security. I'm actually from a supermarket background, and my brother's a grocer. So I understand, how important the government puts on these. I mean, he's been working with the military during the earthquakes in Christchurch, during COVID. This is clearly being looked after by the government, as we've noticed. And the only reasons there was stockouts was because of, obviously, panic buying. There's nothing to do with the supply chain. In terms of local produce and whatnot, in terms of China, they haven't, from what I understand, there hasn't been a big issue around that. Again, the government has been so, I guess, paranoid about any social disruption through lack of food supply. There've been a couple of items I know that have been, that typically were panic bought out, rice and whatnot, but that was the standard stuff, and everything's kind of gone back to normal. But what we have seen has been a huge uptake in online commerce around things which weren't typically online. And we've seen things like Gulf Foods and that have, I think, lifted the game with online. And there's people that you wouldn't have normally expected to be, they've really had to come up. And so I'm sure we're seeing that with anything from farmers markets to small-time suppliers. So e-commerce, I think, has also come to the party in resolving a lot of those supply line issues and logistics. And a lot of those tech companies have incredible logistics chains. When you look at the Alibabas of the world and the Amazons and whatnot, rightly or wrongly, these guys are going to thrive, and they're going to make sure those things keep happening. If there's money, there's demand for organic tomatoes, Amazon will find a way. So I don't think that's going to be affected too much.
Cool. Emily, you said you had quite a few questions. Is that all? No, you.
I think I should just have a chat to Jade one day about food and beverage and
I'd love to hear your model. It sounds fascinating.
And I think I've probably got a few other organisations you might get some keynote speaking at.
Great.
Sounds good.
You didn't really talk about it, Jade, but you're also massive into social impact and sustainability as part of your whole, your model and what you stand for, right? Which you didn't kind of go into as much.
Yeah,
what you do.
Absolutely. And I'm a big fan of the whole social enterprise models. And as we mentioned, we're a B Corp. For those who don't know it, it's one of the world's leading social enterprise certifications. But I think in times like this, it makes, this is when culture comes out in an organization as well. And it really does all those hard yards of company culture and the way you treat your employees and your stakeholders. This is the time you see it, and it does pay dividends. And we've seen that with our team. I mean, I won't start the number of stories I've got of people who have done incredible things for my business up in China in the last 3-4 months. You know, going through 2 weeks of more quarantine in a terrible apartment in Beijing just to get back to help me in the business. Because in China, if you move between cities, you've got to do 2 weeks quarantine as well. So, you know, this is when our years of I think, you know, graft with culture and building that kind of social enterprise and social capital is really paying off. And I have little doubt that you guys are in a similar situation.
Awesome. Does anyone else have any questions they'd like to ask or discuss? Viveka.
Yeah, hi Jade, just a quick, practical question, because I'm just trying to picture what's happening in Beijing in your businesses at the moment, and maybe that's just really obvious, but so are you able to deliver at the moment? Is that how your business is operating, or are any restaurants open for visits there?
You know, China didn't stop delivery the whole crisis, so they controlled the contact of delivery person with the customer, and they had to be dropped off in certain sanitized locations. And you know, and China's very good at, you know, mobilizing people systems. I mean, that's part of the job of the Communist Party, is just how do you move 1.4 billion people around a country. But we haven't been interrupted, and actually one of my chains, Gung Ho, that specialized in pizza delivery, and we were just a delivery business, so we've actually done very well. And I say very well, we're about 20% down year on year for the quarter, which is very well in the situation. The restaurants haven't fared so well, but that being said, the government has been pretty quick in China to push people back out onto the street now and finding ways to safely reopen. For example, in my restaurants, we have a limit on the number of people in the restaurant. There can only be 3 people at a table, and there has to be a table in between each table, you know, free for social distancing. There's a lot of requirements around hygiene in the kitchen. Employees have temperature checked every 4 hours. They are forced to wear PPE gear. It's you know, it's communist restaurant management. But hey, it works. And I'm not saying I'm a fan of the Communist Party. What I'm saying is that it is a very effective way to manage. It's basically military law. You know, that's what we're operating in right now. And it does work for a limited time, you know, and while you get through the worst of it. So other things would be around contactless payments. I mean, China's currently testing, you may have read, in 12 companies, their digital currency. And China's seriously looking at getting rid of currency forever out of the Chinese economy. Wow. And so Starbucks, McDonald's, all these guys are currently testing it. And that was developed just during the lockdown. I imagine the country's been looking to do that for a long time. And I know why, because you suddenly know who you tax. You can't hide a digital transaction. There's no cash payment. So, you know, it plays into the government's tax strategy as well. But what I'm referring to is you'll see a lot of change in the way that people operate in terms of this distancing and social distancing, which will be, I assume, here forever, in the same way that, you know, airport security has been here ever since 9/11, and now we're just used to it. You know, it'll be the same thing. You know, this is just going to change the paradigm, and we'll, in 2 years' time, forget that we never used to sterilize our hands before we went into a supermarket.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Thanks. It's just fascinating to hear how it's operating in different places. And yeah,
that podcast, as I mentioned, he goes right into, I mean, I'm not in market, I'm in Waiheke, but my mate Alan, who's a very successful restaurateur, goes into the details of what they do, and it is quite fascinating to hear the measures taken. Yep.
Do we have any more questions or feedback? Yep, Janine.
Well, my question, thank you very much. I've loved every minute of that. And it also has an application not only to businesses, it seems to me, but to our individual lives and how we manage them. So it's been very inspiring from that point of view. I have a very simple question, is what are you going to do now? And are you going to stay here on Waiheke? And I want to know.
I should ask my life coach, Simi, that. No, I'm taking time out, Janine. I've got my first child on the way in about 4 weeks' time, so that's the priority for the next few months. And then, but really keen to get engaged with the Waiheke community, and I'm a big believer in the power of communities to change the world. And I don't see many better examples in Waiheke. So looking forward to finding my little niche here and how I can get amongst it, and at the same time try and do some stuff that can impact New Zealand and our position in the world. I think New Zealand, in a similar vein, I think at the end of this, New Zealand's going to be an incredible prosperous position if we can manage the economy without too much destruction. Health, isolation, well-being, people's priorities are just changing around the world, and New Zealand sits right in the middle of all that. So, fast forward 2 or 3 years when the airline industry gets back on its feet, New Zealand is going to be one of the places that people want to invest, live, travel to, educate in, you name it. So there's some incredible times ahead for New Zealand, but we just need to get through the rough patch.
Emily just said you need to open an epic pizza place on the island. That was the latest comment. Lovely. I like it. You can always do with some more pizza places.
I think Bevan's got that covered well and truly. It's great.
Yeah, true. Were there any more questions or comments? We're nearing the end of our hour, only really a few minutes left, so could probably wrap things up otherwise. But yeah, I'll pass you over to Simon.
Oh, G, I think G's got a question.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see.
That's okay. No, just a small one. Thank you very much, Jade, and thank you, Sophie and Simon, for co-hosting this. Did you just say like 2-3 years? Because that kind of changes quite a bit in my mind before airlines gonna take off again and flying. So you expect a really long time of building that runway.
Yeah, again, this is all very one person's opinion, right? And there's so many different elements.
Sure.
But you ask in terms of airlines and tourism, just from at least the readings I've done and the sources I listen to, is that the airline industry is completely broken. Whether it's Airbus filing for liquidation or Boeing needed to be bailed out. I mean, there's GE. This is just unheard of stuff. And even once they get back to nothing's going to change till the vaccine, right? We all know that. So once the vaccine comes online, which is probably 18 to 24 months, according to Bill Gates, who I tend to trust, then we'll start to see tourism come back on any meaningful scale outside of Australia, hopefully. And that's going to take at least 6-12 months for people have confidence to really get out there and start spending. And if the economy is strong. So prudently, I feel year-on-year numbers, I would imagine for the tourism sector, probably looking at 2 to 3 years before they start hitting numbers they're currently doing before pre-COVID. But I think if we get a really strong domestic and Australian policy in place ASAP, they'll get back to numbers which will allow them to survive and hopefully make enough profit to pay their needs until tourism comes back on tap.
Cool, thank you.
Are we all good? Anyone else? Any final questions? No, okay. I just want to say a huge thank you, Jade, for giving us your time tonight, because I know that, hand up. There was so much great information that I think is applicable to anyone's business, and I think it's really helpful to look at the mindset that we need to have, as well as the practical side of actually looking at the bottom line and looking at your costs and having practical things that we can all do and take away in our business. So that's super helpful, and I will share the link for the Asian Hustle podcast and your website.
Okay.
And I'm really excited because I know you're not the kind of person who will be taking a break for too long, because you have so many things that you want to create. So I'm excited to see what that involves, and it's exciting that you can be part of our community and we can hopefully all collaborate together on something. So thank you so much for your time, and hopefully I think there'll probably be quite a few questions that kind of percolate for people. So maybe we can find a way to channel those back to you, or you can come into our WhatsApp group or something like that.
Cool.
But thank you.
I'd love to. And yeah, again, guys, I've got a lot of faith in this island, and I'm really honoured to be able to land and try and add to the community, right? So I'm looking forward to joining Waiheke Connect, becoming the latest member, and look forward to meeting you guys all in person, and yeah, happy to help in any way I can. So best of luck on your journeys.
Awesome. Thank you.
Can we do like a round of applause?
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jade.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jade.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers. Amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome.
Cheers.
Cool. Enjoy the
That was
weekend.
the best Friday night I've had in a few weeks. So thanks, guys.
I got a beer waiting. So.
Cool. Yeah, thank you so much, Jade, and everyone have a great rest of your evening. Awesome that so many of you came along for this, and we're going to try and do more of these types of things because I feel like they're just really energizing and exactly what we need right now. So thanks for supporting this, and awesome to see you all. Really appreciate it. So yeah, yay, thanks.
Great.
Thanks,
Thanks,
bye,
guys.
Bye. Ciao. Bye.
Bye-bye.